I was busy making a new episode about Lisa Mosconi, a neurologist who directs Cornell's Alzheimer's prevention program. It's what I love to do because my heroes are scientists who are actually doing science and making great scientific advances, which she is doing in spades. Her program does MRI and PET scans so they can see what's up with the brains of people on different diets. She has a fascinating book I'm reviewing. TED has done such a great job of attracting top neurologists like her. Sandrine Thuray, 7 million views. Wendy Suzuki, 8.5 million views. Laura Boyd, 36 million. Faith in humanity restored, watching so many people watch real scientists like that. But all of a sudden, my channel lit up with information about me I never knew. I've been exposed for spreading lies. I might also be a charlatan and scientifically illiterate. And being clueless, I got destroyed by a professor. I always want to take comments on my channel seriously and understand where they're coming from. I didn't see anything specific in these comments to tell me where I'm off base, but if a professor is calling me out, that sounds important. I'd so much rather apologize and correct myself than to stay wrong. The dumbest thing I could do is to stay wrong and harm my own health and everyone else who watches my channel. So I decided to pause the brain episode and see what Professor Kay has to say. He's been a guest lately on some of the shows hosted by Carnivore Doctor YouTube stars, and those interviews are getting good traction. When I landed on his channel, I noticed some familiar faces like Stanford professor Christopher Gardner. I've listened to many of his lectures over the years, read his papers, and I'm enrolled in one of his nutrition courses. His latest paper, the Swap Meat Athlete Study, comparing performance of recreational athletes across 3 diets, is small, but it's very interesting. Bart's episode about me is 96 minutes long. It's about debunking the episode I had just done about Professor Tim Noakes. I watched all 96 minutes of it to see where Bart thinks I had gone wrong. You're probably interested in less time, so I'll just touch on the parts you're probably most interested in about me and the topics we covered. I'll link his episode in the description for people who want more. First, am I doing this for the money?
And you're an ideologue who's here to make money and fleecing other stupid people of their money to support your little sing-song.
I am retired because I'm old, and fortunately, I don't need the money. I do this for fun and hopefully to bring some good into the world. I don't know how much Bart knows about Plant Chomper finances, but let's get the inside scoop from my accountant and auditor.
My kids call me the Countess of Cash. At age 71, I still work full-time at our family company, and that's my official title. Unfortunately for me, Chris is obsessive about Plant Chomper finances. He didn't want to run ads on his channel, but YouTube requires it, so he turns off all the options he can, like non-skippable ads and ads that interrupt his episodes in the middle. Don't get me started on how much money he loses buying so many books, paying for access to talks from organizations like the American Diabetes Association, etc. He gets asked every week to promote some product, and he turns them all down. People offer to donate to support the channel, and he says, "No thanks. You don't want to know how much money he loses on this. I wish I didn't know."
This is what YouTube said I earned from the Tim Noakes episode during its first week, $75. But I spent considerably more than that because I bought his books and some papers I used in the episode.
Perhaps, though, Chris, you could bring yourself up to speed with some of the methodologies that are available to circumvent those paywalls.
I know, Bart said I didn't need to. Yes, I've known about Sci-Hub forever. I also pay for stock footage and photos I use. And yes, I know about Creative Commons too. It usually takes me 3 weeks to produce an episode because of all the research and also trying to figure out how to display the data in a way that's simple in video form. But what if someone like Bart were able to turn those into longer episodes and publish one every day or two like he's doing? He turned mine into 96 minutes, adding 72 minutes of monetizable content. If you then let YouTube run both skippable and non-skippable ads throughout the episode, you get this.
Let's do that.
Trying to find a Medicare plan can be confusing.
You mean the 22-country study?
What is being a hero? Sometimes it's choosing playtime over prep time, or skipping the grocery store to do something you love.
Between LDLC, so-called, and anything else.
Every layer of this mud has revealed another layer.
That seems like a sweet gig compared to my financial disaster of a YouTube channel. Thank goodness I'm retired, and please nobody tell Tony. But a new episode every day doesn't give Bart much time to fact-check the career scientists he's debunking. He also has a Patreon page, which I don't have, and he's had a side hustle selling a vegan dietary supplement that he has taken for a very long time.
Here is a product which is derived from a blue-green cyanobacter that grows in this one particular lake. December of 2010 was when I started taking the product. The product changed hands for the new company, and I decided to come on board and become a marketer of the product in my own right. I'm taking 4 capsules once a day.
It made me curious about where he's a professor, because most universities would want their faculty devoting time to doing science, publishing papers, and teaching. I could find that he was once a lecturer, not a professor, at Montfort, and he had Wintech in his Twitter bio once, Fairfield another time, but neither has a record of him that I could find. But I did watch this interview where he explains why he isn't a professor.
When you are appointed as an academic, obviously before that you will go for a job interview, and the panel will ask you a bunch of questions. And one of the classic questions that they ask just about invariably is, what separates you from every other academic that we're going to be interviewing for this job? To which I've always proudly got up on my hind legs and said, I will never stand up in front of a paying crowd of students and espouse fallacious dogma.
You would have had to lecture to people, have X amount of plant matter in your diet, be it broccoli or greens or something, because you need to get X, Y, and Z vitamin or mineral out of it. But even with all that knowledge, you're still happy to go, nah, I don't need it. It's not necessary.
Correct. Within, a few weeks, you get a knock on your office door and the senior dean comes in and says, now listen, we need to have a chat about what you've been saying to students in class. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? 3 or 4 weeks ago, you interviewed me. I told you what I was going to do. I'm now doing it. I'm legally entitled to do it. And now you're telling me to not do it. And then that starts a whole process of bullying, harassment, all these different processes that they start invoking, and this and that and the other thing. And that basically is, at the end of the day, why I went, this academic game is not for me.
But I'm not aware of any university that wouldn't ask this question.
I get people saying to me, where is the evidence that your carnivore diet is good for you? Okay. To which the answer is, of course, it does not yet exist in the literature. We don't yet have that science because we're just getting started down this track.
But Bart did have something very important and valid to say about me and my episodes.
Videos about stuff he knows nothing about in an area that he has no training in whatsoever, that being health, nutrition, physiology, anything basically relating to the stuff that I absolutely am actually an expert in.
I try to make it plain in my episodes, as I did right up front in that episode, that I am an earth scientist, and my mission with Plant Chompers is to identify with the vast majority of people who are trying to figure out who to listen to. The dilemma we all face, though, is there are university scientists whose ideas completely oppose each other. How do mere mortals like us make sense of that? I started that episode having just walked out of an earth science talk relating to food systems. I am at MIT's Media Lab today because I just gave a TEDx talk to a packed audience. The beard was to represent our forests because we've converted almost half of them globally to farmland. And that is driven primarily by the food we eat. Here's what Bart had to say about that.
Yes. A lot of forest has been cut down to clear land for human food production purposes. Most of it, Chris, for monocropping, not for grazing.
Did Bart just say I should stay out of nutrition and then rendered an opinion in a field he's not trained in without backing it up with evidence? Here's some evidence I had just presented in my talk. For land use, there is nothing like cows, except maybe sheep, but we don't eat much of them anymore. This comes from very well-researched data from scientists at Oxford and shows that the elephant in the room is actually a cow. Chicken, pork, and fish use a fraction of land cows do, and plants are way below them. If you add crops, you see that their global agricultural footprint is less than half of pasture land. 43% of those crops are used to feed animals. If you remove beef from the picture, global land use for agriculture drops in half. It's shocking. And if you remove dairy, it drops in half again. Is it any wonder that 80% of the deforestation of the Amazon is thought to be for raising cattle, and most of the remainder is to grow soy to feed pigs? Since the year 2000, we've converted tropical forest to farmland equivalent to the area of Ireland, the UK, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, and Poland combined. I can't imagine a scientist in 2022 not knowing this and promoting an all-meat diet any more than I can imagine going back to burning coal in our homes to heat them. But I know when speaking about nutrition, I have to back up everything with data from the best scientists who are actually doing science and collecting data, just like I have to do in earth science. That's why you often hear me in my episodes saying, that's above my pay grade. Maybe we should hear from a scientist like Roy Taylor, whose team has collected so much solid MRI data of ailing organs. And that's why my 20-minute episodes take 3 weeks to make.
Chris has been obsessed for 22 years with the science of nutrition studies.
I noticed in the comments section on Bart's channel there were some specifics. One commenter said Bart caught me lying about my father. I know that tendency well because when my father got heart disease, I always had to mow the lawn because he said it would strain his heart.
Hang on. Was that the same father you were talking about earlier? With the clear arteries, that one? How many fathers have you got, Chris?
Here's what I actually said in that episode. Like my 93-year-old father-in-law who can eat anything and his LDL stays low and arteries clear.
I can clear that up. It's my dad who's 93 and has great arteries. Chris's dad died of a heart attack at 70 after years of eating the Atkins diet.
Commenters and Bart made a very fair point about me not always pointing out conflicts of interest. I did it with some papers Dr. Noakes was referencing, but inexplicably I didn't when referencing a paper that refuted his claim about LDL cholesterol not being causal. I wrestled with that before releasing that episode. First it was in and then it was out. I was having two problems. The first is it was a very long list of authors and I wanted to treat them all fairly without making the episode a whole lot longer. For example, the statin research Dr. Krauss referred to was funded by the NIH, and I didn't want to paint him unfairly with too broad a brush. The second is, I feel differently about food company funding than I do about pharma funding. 99% of the time, food companies are not funding research to improve the health of a product. It's to sell more of it regardless of its health. Marion Nestle has some great books about that. Pharma companies can do that too, buyer beware, but oftentimes they're funding really good scientists, as they have with Brian Ferentz, to improve the drugs almost all of us end up depending on for some portions of our lives. And if you're a meat lover, you must appreciate the many billions that pharma funds universities each year to research the vaccines, antibiotics, and dewormers that keep meat abundant and cheap. And if you're a pet lover, same thing. Shots, painkillers, dewormers, yada. They move science forward a lot more often than food companies do, and they need leading university researchers. Bart didn't mention that I made a glaring error with not disclosing funding, and I apologize. Nina Teicholz is Dr. Noakes' most referenced source and helped him with his legal problems. And she receives dark money to the tune of $1 million a year from an Enron hedge fund billionaire in Texas to fund her lobbying on behalf of the beef industry, and her PR campaigns to discredit nutrition scientists. I really am sorry I neglected that. One important clarification is Bart frequently claimed that I said you should ignore studies with questionable funding.
Because remember, Chris, conflict of interest is bad and it's a reason to ignore everything they have to say and move on.
What I actually said is those are yellow flags. Well, actually, I said, uh-oh. The New Zealand Dairy Board, uh-oh.
New Zealand Dairy Board. Industry funding invalidates science, says Chris. That's what he's implying here.
But in the episode, I devoted a lot of minutes to those papers to go through their claims. Bart corrected me on the 7-country study led by Ancel and referred to it as the 22-country study.
The 7-country study was only one of the many things that he...
You mean the 22-country study?
The 22-country study is actually this one from Yerushalmi and Hillebo, published in 1957, a year before the 7-country study began. The 22-country study was based on United Nations food data and published this fascinating chart showing the sharp rise in mortality that comes from eating more animal protein. All of the 7 countries data was from 16 areas among 7 countries over 50 years, not 22 countries. But it pretty much confirmed the chart in the Yerushalmi and Hillebo paper and added the clarity that the added mortality was coming from saturated fat-laden meat, not fish. Bart made the point that that was associative data and you can't infer a cause from that.
You cannot inform on cause and effect using associative data.
but he did make an exception for the smoking studies because the association was so strong.
The incidence of, for example, lung cancer in smoking populations increases relatively by 11,500% per pack year of smoking. That's really, really hard to ignore.
He didn't produce evidence for those numbers. The landmark studies on smoking were led by Richard Dole of Oxford. He was treated just like Ancel Keys was treated when Dr. Dole showed evidence that smoking was harmful.
In 1950, when they published their results, it was received with apathy, anger, and disbelief.
So clearly we had to approach it by some other method, and the obvious method was what we now call a cohort study, and to try and see if we could predict who would get lung cancer. So we thought doctors would be a good population to study.
The British doctors provided quite a nice natural experiment. Some of them didn't smoke at all. Some of them started smoking cigarettes when they were young and kept on smoking cigarettes all their lives. And then when the results were published in the British Medical Journal, the doctors read the British Medical Journal and thought, my God, this is serious. This doesn't just kill patients, this kills doctors.
And that is exactly analogous to where we are today, but for different topics. While doctors were influenced by medical journals, consumers were influenced by this.
Come to where the flavor is. Come to Marlboro country.
And this.
The media were, of course, against us for a long time, and whenever they announced a new observation on the harmful effects of smoking, as likely as not the man who announced it would be smoking a cigarette, or they would have someone else get up from the tobacco industry and say, well, it's controversial, somebody else doesn't believe it.
But the experts who dogged Richard Dole his whole life and weren't actually doing science didn't have the internet to amplify their claims. Dole's study of doctors, which, like the 7 countries study, lasted 50 years, caused the U.S. Congress to ask him and his co-author, Richard Peto, to testify about the magnitude of the problem.
And he was prepared to go to the United States of America and face the venom of tobacco lawyers. It wouldn't be a thing that anybody would want to do, and I saw Richard doing this in his 91st and 92nd year. But I think when Dole walked into a room, you sort of had to be on best behaviour. You certainly couldn't think in a woolly way in front of him.
Because he actually did the studies, understood study design, and fully understood the data. For their congressional testimony, they cited an American study that showed about an 11-fold increase in lung cancer deaths among longtime smokers. Not the 11,500% number that Bart provided per pack year smoked. The numbers that Dr. Dole provided were not very different from the ones the scientists were reporting on Dr. Keyes' study, which was going on at the same time. When the study began, it showed the incidence of mortality from heart disease was almost 10-fold between Finland, who ate a lot of meat and dairy, and Japan, who ate a lot of fish and vegetables. That was before the Finnish government took Keyes' findings seriously and instituted programs like Berries for Dairies, incentivizing farmers to convert their farms from dairy farms to berry farms in Finland. I did an episode about that with another giant in the field and a Keyes protege. Fortunately, Richard Dole lived long enough to see some of the world stop pushing back on his epidemiology. He and Richard Peto were both knighted by the Queen for their achievements. Those are the kind of scientists I advocate for and defend, and a big reason why I spend so much time and money doing Plant Chompers. Thank you, Tony. There was a lot of pushback on me from both commenters and Bart about claiming Dr. Noakes was retweeting conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, you've said conspiracy theories I don't know how many times in this little film of yours already, Chris. It provides you with no credibility whatsoever.
Fair enough. Let's look at some tweets and see if I was being too harsh. Here's Dr. Noakes retweeting Peter Clack, a long-retired journalist from Australia. Peter's view is that atmospheric CO2 is on a dangerous decline, and if it gets much lower, all life on Earth will end. His tweets get a lot of traction. Where does he get his belief from? Here's one of his sources. Lepidinus, I have no idea how to pronounce that, says it all started with this German document in 1942 that they wrote in case they didn't win the war militarily.
He also discusses with Hitler a new plan to unite Europe, not just under the conquering hammer of Blitzkrieg, but through a lasting political and economic union, which the Nazis named Europäische Wirtschaftsgemeinschaft, or the European Economic Community.
So I guess it's true that one man's conspiracy is another man's truth. To me, the idea that a German economic document from 1942 is driving Earth scientists like me 80 years later is a conspiracy theory, but I guess to Tim Noakes, it's truth. My conspiracy theory is the coal industry found a retired journalist who had blogged about his financial struggles, so they pay him to write a constant stream of pro-coal tweets, same as Nina Teicholz does for beef. I get offers every week to promote health products on my channel for money, so the theory seems plausible. He claims the UN has led a destructive 30-year path based on a grotesque lie about the wonderful life-giving properties of carbon dioxide. That makes me and my professors grotesque liars since I started my geophysics career in the 70s. If only we had known about a journalist on a crime beat in Australia 50 years ago, we would have saved billions in scientific instruments and research. Last thing, some people called me out as a coward for turning down his invitation to debate him. I understand why it could look that way.
It's your arrogance and Dunning-Kruger that won't allow you to actually engage with me. And probably, your ego, because you know that as soon as you actually engage with me in a debate about this topic, I will absolutely wreck you, clown.
But it's not something I can do because I often include my grandkids in my episodes and they watch them. I have to stay family friendly, and if you've watched any of Bart's debates and episodes, you know they're anything but that. I hope you can understand. So what are my conclusions from Bart's fiery episode? Number one, I would have loved to see evidence, charts, diagrams, publications, but I think what we saw was 96 minutes of expert opinion, and I think most scientists believe that expert opinion is the lowest tier of evidence. Number two, any mention of conspiracy theories really fires up the comments section, and I know they can be used as dismissive insults. But I felt in the Tim Noakes episode I had to bring them up because the evidence is so strong that in Tim Noakes' case, he's strongly influenced by them, and they're very influential on the internet. And number three, now I get to go back to the Lisa Mosconi Brainpower episode. Yay! I finished her books and I loved them. Highly recommended. Very convincing evidence from a truly great scientist we're all so lucky to have in our world.
Thanks for watching. Chris almost never asks people to like and subscribe, but I will. At the TEDx conference, I had to tell people about his channel because he never does. How does he expect to grow it if he doesn't promote it? Debunk that, sweetheart.